I'm Luke Harriman, and so today, along with Jorge, we'll be presenting about evaluating the role of microfinance institutions in Mexico. So, what our paper does, we develop some econometric models to evaluate microfinance institutions in Mexico. So we're talking specifically about BANSEFI, especially, which is the Mexican government's main sort of development finance branch. And sort of evaluating it on a couple of different levels. There's been more research that's done in other countries, so like Thailand or Bangladesh, on the effectiveness of microcredit institutions, less so in Mexico. So here we have, this is GDP per capita from 1960 all the way almost up to the present year. So Mexico had pretty reasonable rates of growth through the 1960s and 70s. And then sort of in the early 80s here, there was a crisis, and then another crisis in 1994 and 1995. And so Mexico has sort of been falling behind, especially countries like Korea, and noticeably hasn't really made any progress in catching up towards nations like the US or France. This is the National Survey of Income and Expenditures, and we've used it to calculate income growth here. So on the green line, income growth going up, and then again in the 94-95 crisis decreasing, and then just now sort of recovering. And inequality here at the red line sort of moving up and down and decreasing slightly as we get to the present day. During the crisis here, the poverty rate increased and kept increasing all the way up to 1998. So we've seen with some of these indicators, like at household level stuff, the impact of the crisis lasting a lot longer than you might see with just GDP. So Mexico is officially categorized as a middle income country. Darker green here is higher GDP per capita for each of the municipalities or counties in Mexico. Notice that it's generally higher here along the US border, and also generally higher in cities. This is, and the colors didn't show up quite as well as I wanted, but it's the Human Development Index by the United Nations. And you can see, like, along the US border, relatively high levels of human development. You also see generally higher levels along the coast of the country and in major cities. The areas in sort of the dark gray, black here are areas without access to commercial banks. So you can see there are pretty significant parts of the country where it's not just that it's hard to, say, get a loan from a commercial bank, but there are no commercial banks. So I will turn it over to Jorge.
Thank you. Well, I think that just to summarize the findings, what we have a lot of motivation facts for doing this research. How microfinance institutions can address or help the households in these poor communities to move forward and increase their welfare conditions, right? So what is BANSEFI? The main agency for providing microcredit institutions in Mexico. So just for giving you an idea of how big BANSEFI is, think about this number. By 2008, they have more than 1 million deposit accounts. And they are only microfinance institutions for poor communities in Mexico. What is the nature of the study? Well, we are interested in micro outcomes. The idea of the study was to have a panel study of households and institutions and see how, again, supply and demand meet, and they interact to create better outcomes for the households. Using Gaboski and Townsend, we said, well, let us see how far we can get with the data we have. They focus on some impact variables. What do we mean by impact variables? Things that are correlated with the household well-being. Well, we identify financial institutions policies. Why? Because we have two sorts of effects of the financial institutions on the households. So the first effect has to do with just having access to the financial system. That can create huge differences in the outcomes of the households. But the second one, which is something that is new in our research, is what if branches have different policies? How policies affect the cost and benefits of being in the financial system? So what we did was to create a large, and I mean large, set of complementary models. For what? Not just for fun, believe me, it's not fun being running models again and again and again, but for consistency, robustness and consistency. We are going to study two family of models. The first family has to do with the effects of membership on outcomes. just for being in the financial system, how different are your outcomes, how it affects your outcomes. The second one is more tricky. This simple model creates very complex interactions between the policies and the participation. Also, well, if the policy is directing the outcome, what if the policy affects participation? If you change the policy, you change the cost and benefits of being in the financial system. And because you change that, you change the decision of participation. So we are going to address that also, but in the membership equation. We created a subset of variables associated with the household and the community for being used in the instrument and for being used as controls for the regressions in the outcome regressions, okay? If there are so many regressions and so many methodologies, what is the coefficient I care about? The beta, right? You care about the beta. What we want to have there is a lot of little stars. For being honest, that's what we are searching. Stars that make that these things are significant and more or less sizable. And they are. This is a dummy variable. Are you poor or not? Are you in the agricultural subsistence level or not? So the variable, the effect is a sort of change in the probability. If you are part of the financial system, how it modifies the probability that you stay there for a while. So good news, the coefficients are negative, which is good. If you are part of the financial system, the probability that you stay in a subsistence level of income reduces. Modifications in policies affect membership, and membership affect the outcomes. It's like the indirect effect I told you. What we are expecting is that the coefficient here and here are significant. What we want to address is, what if some branches do different, and what are the effects of these difference in branches? So from all the survey, we selected some specific questions that show to be different across branches to see if they are effective or not. For instance, savings policy seems to have no effect at all in changing membership. Well, that's an interesting finding. Credit policies indeed have some effect. The capacity of the branch manager to create credit and adjust the interest rate could play a role in determining who gets credit or not, which is interesting by itself. If you require people to have a collateral for having a credit, reduce by 12 or 15% the probability of getting credit. If you provide some advice on how to manage a firm, and if the firm has rents or not, that's the main question. Do the firm will work? And that has to do with the Greenwood-Jovanovic model. And centralization. It turns out that it has one of the strongest significant and positive effects on participation. As all the theories that are around for other countries, in Mexico, participation in the financial system do matter. We find evidence that indeed providing microfinance services, given the heterogeneity, the spatial heterogeneity in time in Mexico, is having good results. Our study coincides with a large branch of literature on this, for Thailand, for India, for United States indeed, for other countries in Latin America, and both provides specific evidence for the Mexican developing country. And finally, we are like opening a whole new agenda on this spatial use of information. If we observe some features in this small survey that seems to be in the same direction that Thailand, then obviously it motivates us to use the next round of information, which is aggregating information for the whole country, but for explaining the whole country patterns in development.